or been supported to through cooperation and joint advocacy to work on gender budget initiatives or on campaigns that would hold governments accountable. So the reason behind the project is actually to identify all these organizations that have been working on gender responsive budgeting, or organizations that are interested into working in gender responsive budgeting, and organizations that have done work that is relevant but is not gender responsive budgeting. So we've developed 3 different training programs for these 3 different types of organizations. In the first, we worked with organizations that have worked with gender responsive budgeting, and but with them we tried to enhance their knowledge and skills to acquire skills in application of gender responsive budgeting tools that they have not used before. So they have been working with GRB, but with some tools and not with others. So we try to enhance their knowledge on the tools they have not used, because they are also very valuable and can provide us with evidence and basis for advocacy for new gender budget initiatives. With organizations that have relevant work to gender responsive budgeting, we've divided this group into 2 subgroups. The first is organizations that more or less focus on the budget, but they have not really worked with gender concepts or with gender responsive budgeting tools. And we have developed a specific program for this group of organizations. And the second group, the second subgroup in RU are organizations that have been doing gender mainly, but not just gender, but also other specific issues related to gender, or other sectors like environment, like energy efficiency, like governance and so on, and would like to bridge this knowledge and experience with gender and gender responsive budgeting. So you are participating in the 3rd training program that we have developed. So after the trainings, in the course of June and July, actually in July, because we will publish it early July, we will have an internal call to applications to all the organizations that we have trained. These are 88 organizations. So we have reached out to 88 organizations who are becoming part of our network. They are knowledgeable to how to use gender responsive budgeting tools. The idea of the call is to invite you to develop a project concept that we will fund through the network, and that project would have to involve application of some of the GRB tools, would have to involve advocacy campaign, and would have to involve engagement of or cooperation between organizations within this network or in your countries, to mobilize citizens to hold government accountable using the gender responsive budgeting approach. So the different discussions that we had this morning are very relevant, because you can, we are quite liberal in terms of how you do this concept of the project. We are very happy that you are very much interested into finding partners within the network, and we would be encouraging actually this type of cooperation, either national or regional. into applying the GRP tools. But you can do it on your own as well as your organization, in your country, in your municipality, on a topic that is relevant to your country and your municipality, but using gender responsive budgeting tools. So I will not talk too much. I think that we are developing. Not by just building capacities, by applying the tools on our policy and budget work, but we are also learning by doing on this networking front. One part of the project that we are implementing is related to the connectivity that the project will allow for between the organizations in the network. And you will be invited to different network meetings that will allow for the development of the network. So we would invite you all to contribute to the network development as well. So you will have you will have a say in that process as well. Let me go to the main reason why we are here, and that is the gender responsive budgeting. I will now share my screen if I can find my presentation. I think I opened my presentation, but it's not here. Let me check. Okay. So the reason why we have turned to gender responsive budgeting is because there are many good reasons why we do gender responsive budgeting. First of all, we do this because we are meeting international commitments, and I think that Mirela was talking about CEDAW, which is the starting point in terms of gender equality, but is not starting point for gender responsive budgeting, because gender responsive budgeting is a concept that dates a little bit later than CEDAW. As you know, CEDAW sets the basis, and then we have gender mainstreaming for the first time being recognized at the Beijing conference, and then gender responsive budgeting is a concept that builds on gender mainstreaming. Actually, it dates decades after gender mainstreaming. Why it has been formulated? Because actually the feminists realized
Feministi su shvatili da integracija rodne perspektive nije dovoljna.
Not just to
Na duhet jo vetëm të merremi me politikat, jo vetëm të
политики да се анализира дали тие одговарат на различните
femeilor și ale bărbaților care reies și care
Iz rodnih uloga muškaraca i žena u društvu, odnosno
prevailing in the different countries, and they're widespread everywhere. So there is no country without gender roles or gender stereotypes, which are influencing gender inequality. So all these feminists were suddenly realized that gender mainstreaming is not enough. We cannot just analyze the policies from a gender perspective and see what is their impact on the real lives of women and men, and whether they contribute or to gender inequality, or they are creating new gender inequalities. And they turned to another policy tool that is also very important, and that is the budget. Why the budget? Because the budget is the most comprehensive policy instrument that every country is using, and it unites all the policies of the country. And without the budget, we can have the greatest policies, but without the budget, we cannot implement the policies. So whether a policy is good in terms of gender equality, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will create gender equality, because it might be that there is no budget allocated for it. So that's why the feminists turn to not just the policy, but the budget, and have included the gender responsive budgeting in several international documents. In terms of our countries, most important are the recommendations of the Council of Europe, which is the first international organizations to conceptualize gender responsive budgeting. But also, we have also gender responsive budgeting part of the European policy documents. This is the European Gender Equality Strategy and the EU Gender Action Plan. Within these documents, you would see that actually even the European Union is committing to do their public finance share in a gender balanced way. And they expect everyone else, all the members and the accession countries, to do so as well. So, for example, in our IPA funding that we get as countries acceding to the European Union, one of the objectives in each of the IPA programs are gender responsive, and with that way, in that way, also the IPA funding is responsive to the gender needs. So meeting international commitments is one of the reasons why we do gender responsive budgeting. The second reason is because we want to enhance equity by collecting and spending public funds in a gender responsive way. So this means that actually gender is relevant for the overall budget process, as Mirela was saying and explaining. And how we do this by actually assessing the policies that are allowing us to provide income to the budget, whether we are having a gender balanced way into tax policy, which is collecting the budget, the money that are going into the budget, but also it is about how we spend the public funds, whether the spending is relevant to the needs of women and men. And I must say that these are different. Women and men have different roles in our families, in our societies, and therefore they have different needs. So a precondition to whether the budget is being spent in a gender responsive way is to know the needs of women and men, for which we need gender statistics. And this is a topic that we are going to talk about tomorrow. The third issue, sorry, why we do GRB is to promote measurability and to improve efficacy of policies. We can have very good policies that are being developed. We can also have budget allocated to these policies, but whether the policy implementation is reaching out to those that we have aimed the policies to benefit is another question, another issue. So gender responsive budgeting gives us tools to assess the beneficiaries of these policies and the cost effectiveness of the implementation of the policies. With this, we are also proving what is the impact of the budget and the spending to the on gender equality. Lastly, the gender responsive budgeting helps us to progress in democracy. Why? Because it gives us an entry point for civil society, for citizens, individual citizens, for different stakeholders and interest groups to hold the government accountable on how they spend public money in accordance to the different needs of women and men, and whether this affects on the gender relations between women and men. In order to hold government accountable, we have to have data, which is inevitably related to the openness of the budget. So we will need to have a transparent public finance management, which allows us access to budget documents, but also allows us access to policies, implementation related data, and the budget spending data. So in order to hold governments accountable, we need to have transparency of the public finance system. And so in this way, by using the gender responsive budgeting tool, civil societies also contribute to the progress of democracy, because they are strengthening accountability and are enhancing the transparency principles of how we manage public finance. So these are, in a nutshell, the GRB benefits: equality, which is the ultimate aim; accountability. We are trying to also enhance efficiency by doing gender-responsive budget analysis, and all this is possible only if we have transparent public finance system. So what are the main GRB objectives? Is to raise awareness about the gender perspectives in policies, but also in budgets, to emphasize the gap between the policies and the budgets, because there could be good policy but not enough budget. There could be budget but not very gender responsive objectives in policies. So both could not achieve or contribute to gender equality. To increase government accountability towards gender equality, because in many countries, also in Europe, this is a very declarative commitment, but not a commitment that is put in practice. The GRB tool is a very practical tool which makes governments to become more accountable to the gender equality commitments, and to introduce changes in policies and budgets through application of gender responsive budgeting tools that will enhance gender equality. So therefore, actually, gender responsive budgeting is very often called as the good budgeting, because it focuses on the individuals, on the people, and because it is done from a gender perspective, we divide the people into women and men, and we analyze them, their needs, their interests, from a gender perspective, because these are influenced or these are determined by the gender roles and the gender stereotypes that are prevailing everywhere. So what is actually gender responsive budgeting? The first definition to this concept has been done by Council of Europe in 2006. I love this definition, because it says that it's a reflection of the political will, and it is encompassed of steps undertaken to achieve gender equality. It's very simple, this definition, which actually puts an emphasis on the main factor to gender responsive budgeting success, and that is to have political will. So you can really easily assess if your country has a political will. For example, in Macedonia, we have a lot of gender responsive budgeting initiatives happening, but no policy on gender responsive budgeting. In Kosovo, we have very completed policy framework on gender responsive budgeting, as well as in Albania. But in only one country in the region, we have the gender responsive budgeting being implemented from in the whole process of policy making, from identification of a policy problem to evaluation of the impact of the policy and the budget on gender equality, and that is Albania. So I must say that we differ also in the region on the political will that we have expressed towards gender responsive budgeting. And also we differ in terms of the steps that we are undertaking to achieve gender equality, but also to implement gender responsive budgeting. Another definition to gender responsive budgeting is that it is an assessment, a gender assessment of the budget and inclusion of gender perspective in all phases of the budget process. You remember that Mirella was talking about the budget cycle. So this is actually what is the definition showing, and that is that we can have a gender perspective from the budget planning to budget adoption to budget implementation, budget monitoring of the implementation, and the reporting of the execution of the budget. We can have gender perspective included in all phases of the budget process, and that is gender responsive budgeting. Why gender? Why focusing on the budget? Because, as I said, it's the most important policy instrument, and this policy instrument is not gender neutral. You discussed earlier with Mirella about energy efficiency, about how we are planning our toilets in the schools or in the public spaces, how we are designing streets, or how we are building restaurants and, for example, shopping centers. All these measures, all these interventions are not gender neutral, so is not the budget that is allocated for their implementation. The research shows us that women take different understanding and application of the principles of efficiency and savings of energy, and are a very important actor into energy efficiency policies, and having measures that target specifically women in order to succeed into getting better energy efficiency results is a way how to use the budget allocated for energy efficiency measures in a gender specific way. Also, whether we design the school toilets with a faucet in the toilet will allow for women, more women, to use more sustainable menstrual hygiene equipment. Maybe Natasha can give me another word, like the menstrual cups, which are also influencing on the decrease of menstrual poverty. Or whether we allocate money for a street in our neighborhood, it depends whether this money are gender responsive or not. If the street design has a pathway, walking part of the street, and lighting, because women use streets by walking much more, and have, because of different gender socialization patterns, and because of gender inequality in terms of violence on public spaces, women are more victims of violence on the streets, they would use more the investment into the street if there is light installed. So there is no intervention in any of the areas you can think of that is not gender relevant. So also the budget allocated for those interventions is also not gender neutral. In order to have GRB as a good budgeting, we need to recognize that women and men are different, their needs and interests are different. We have to understand that, and to understand that policies and budgets have different impact on the lives of women and men. So GRB is not anything else, only a tool through which we try to look at how we live and what we do from a gender perspective, and to try to reflect that into policies and into budgets. We are talking since the morning about GRB tools. This is one of the terms that we have used quite a lot, and this is what we will use tomorrow and the day after. So GRB is actually a bag of tools, like these maintaining tools that maintaining people are using for mending our houses when the plumbing is wrong, or where the electricity is wrong. GRB is a set of tools that are used in analysis of the gender dimension of policies and budgets. GRB is doable in a budgeting process only if we set procedures for introducing of gender perspective into all phases of the budgeting, and to succeed, it presupposes good knowledge and understanding for the needs of the budget users. I hear some voices.
Excuse me, translators, or who has opened the mic, please close the mic. Kimet, please close the mic.
Okay, so thank you, Mirella. This definition of the gender responsive budgeting is given by Diane Nelson. Diane Nelson is this lady that we have here on the picture. She's one of the gurus for gender responsive budgeting, one of the founding mothers of gender responsive budgeting. She is a professor of finance at the University of Exeter, and here on the picture you will see the representatives of the Gender Budget Watchdog Network. You see Mirela, Vishnya, Belma, Natalia, Christian, Zlatko, and me this February visiting her at the LSE event. So what is not gender responsive budgeting? Gender responsive budgeting is not having a separate budget for women and men. It's about having one budget that is recognizing, is aware of the impact of the budget use on the lives of women and men, because no budget will have the same impact on men and women. Gender responsive budgeting is not dividing every budget line 50% for women needs, 50% for men's needs. It's about having a gender perspective into analysis of all programs, or it could be one program only. It's about showing political will that budget planning and spending will be done in a gender balanced way. And it does not refer to all costs or income. because it could be applied partially, like the EU has decided to have at least one gender objective in their IPA funding, or like Austria has said that each ministry, each public body would have at least 3 objectives that will be gender relevant. So what are the tools for integrated gender into the budget process? There are different ways, and different countries are on the different speed in implementing gender responsive budgeting. I mentioned Austria. Austria is the rock star. Austria has included gender responsive budgeting in their constitution. So it is a principle, a constitutional principle, and requires all public bodies to, and also private, to analyze their measures and interventions from a gender perspective, and to allocate relevant finances for achieving those gender equality goals. Different countries in the region, as well as in Europe and the world, have used different tools for integrating gender responsive budgeting. Gender responsive called budget circular is one of the ways to do it, and having a gender budget guidelines. These tools are aimed to provide gender responsive instructions to government institutions, and it's one way to state explicitly in the budget circular that gender should be reflected in the submissions. So it actually commits every budget user to integrate gender into their budget analysis, in setting budget objectives, and in allocating money to those objectives. Another way to integrate gender in the budget process is to actually have a gender-aware budget statement and gender budget report. Some countries have not used the budget called circular, but they still have a so-called gender budget statement or a gender budget report. For example, France is including every year in their budget and other reformulations of the budget, analysis of the budget from a gender perspective, which are integral part of the budget document. So they are with different color of the budget document. If the budget document is white paper, is printed on white paper, the pages which are presenting the gender perspective of the budget are yellow. So popularly are known as the yellow pages of the budget in France. In other countries, like for example in my own, on central level, the ministries that have introduced gender into the budget programs are issuing a gender budget statement, which provides which sets the gender objectives of the program, the analysis of the situation, the expected impact, and the measures that will be taken in order to achieve that goal, that objective, as well as the budget that will be used in the process. So gender-aware budget statements aim to demonstrate the expected implications of the budget in addressing issues of gender equality. It is usually a statement or a report, like for example in some regions in Spain, like the Basque Country, for example, they are issuing a budget report, which are presenting the impact of the budget on the on women and men, and on the different gender inequality issues for which they have been developed. The measures have been developed. In that respective, actually, the budget statements and the gender budget reports are accountability documents that are showing intention to do something in respect to gender equality. How it is done in practice? First of all, as I said, and as rightfully, since 2006, the Council of Europe has defined, in order to have gender-responsive budgeting, we need to have political will, but also we need to have an institutional setup, some kind of a working group or a gender machinery that will do the gender analysis. We need a set of skills for analyzing the policies and the budget from a gender perspective. If we are civil society contributing to this process, also we need to have set of skills to do the gender analysis and to assess both the political will, but also the institutional capacities and the policies and budgets of the government or the local government to implement this, to achieve the gender equality goals. As I said, we need also gender statistics or sex disaggregated data in order to produce the gender analysis in this process. So these are the main preconditions. What are the approaches? There are two main approaches. The first one is the one that is used by some countries in the region and Austria, that is to establish one or more gender equality objectives and design appropriate activities and identification of budget allocations to achieve the objective. And the second approach, which is the one that has been used in France, in Spain, and in several other countries in the world, that is to systematically examine all budgetary items with the objective of making necessary changes to produce gender equitable measures and outcomes. So what are the experience from the region? I promised, and Mirela asked me to actually present the different countries' experiences in the region. I have most countries here. The two countries that I don't have, they have not actually, in the presentation, they have not actually started with GRB. So we cannot have a presentation on their approach or experience in the process. The first country, alphabetically, is Albania, but also the first country in the region, I must say, because they are most advanced in this process.
Maria, sorry. Somebody left open the mic.
Okay.
Okay, you can continue now.
Okay, actually it's not the mic, it's the dogs in my neighborhood. I will close the door if you excuse me for 1 second.
Okay, okay, good.
I had the door opened from the terrace, sorry. I'm still working from home and I changed the home. Actually, I went to Ohrid this time. Sorry for the interruption. So I will talk about the GRP experience of Albania. As I said, Albania has most advanced process of implementation of this tool. It has been introduced since the introduction of the program and performance budgeting. They are doing this. Well, the Albanian government is saying that they have been doing this for 20 years, but actually the policy framework for the medium-term budgetary budget program is set in 2008. This is actually one of the requirements for EU integration. Why? Because the EU has requested all member states and acceding country by 2009.
Da, do 2009. godine Milica sluči nikada.
Now we have Milica talking, but still, so by 2009, the EU has requested all the countries, including acceding countries, to align their budget process to include program budgeting features. Why is this important? Because there are two different types of budgeting. Line budgeting, which is used in most of the countries, where we show the budget in lines like human resources or salaries, not human resources, but salaries, goods and services, and other costs. The difference with the program budgeting is actually to allow for reorganization and presentation of the budget in a programmatic way, so that we know that this program leads us to the objective of, for example, in education, it's an objective to increase the level of education or the educational results of boys and girls. The addition to the program budgeting is to add performance indicators, which are actually assessing the performance, the success of the implementation of the program and achieving of the objective that is set. So it's a conceptual model that has been set in 2008 in Albania that shows actually the linkages between the inputs we are using, outputs, the immediate results, and the outcomes for each policy intervention. And requires that actually each government intervention has to have a budget program that is developed in this string. So input, output, outcome. It is heavily dependent on measurement of the of monitoring of the implementation and the evaluation of this process. So in order to see the outcome, we need to also have a measurement of the impact of the program. So in terms of gender response, so this conceptual framework has been set in Albania for all programs. But as Mirela said, in 2012, they introduced a gender perspective to this process and developed an overall very comprehensive policy framework with guidelines, with call circulars, with also different software and tools that are gender responsive and are allowing for development of different gender performance indicators. So every program, or where it is possible, it is asked, are asked all central budget users to include at least one gender-based objective and to identify this gender objective in the planning phase of the budget. Then they have developed one electronic system that supports the civil servants to use this conceptual model of inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and ask them to identify all the gender elements on a program level, on the objective level, and on the output level. For an example, if they need to, they decided to develop a gender objective in the program of higher education, they would click higher education. Then on an objective level, they will need to set a key performance indicator related to gender. If the objective is to increase the level of school attendance in rural areas, the gender objective would be increasing the level of school attendance from girls in rural areas, and the key performance indicator that is set there is the number or percentage of girls from rural areas that are attending higher education. On an output level, they would put also an indicator which is gender sensitive, and that is the number of girls from rural areas attending higher education. and through this they would allocate the money for increasing the level of school attendance, and they will gather data in order to monitor the achievement of the objective and the output, expected output, which is the number of girls from rural areas. In Serbia, which is the second country in the region which is quite advanced in GRB, the process started a little bit later than in Albania. Actually, it was introduced with the change of the budget system law in 2015, where in Article 4 it has defined that this law defines that it has to every institution has to provide efficient allocation of budget resources to enhance gender equality, and has also provided a definition for gender responsive budgeting as an introduction of gender equality principle in the budget process, and encompassing gender budget analysis as a restructuring of income and expenditure in order to achieve gender equality. The main actor in this process, like in Albania, is the Ministry of Finance, which is committed to plan and to monitor the introduction of GRB in Serbia. As in Albania, also there has been developed a software for budget users. There has been a guideline on how to introduce GRB in budgeting, but our assessment as a network shows that all this is not very publicly available. Although there are results in the process, there are 16 piloted GRB initiatives in 2016, 25 in 2017, 35 budget users and 14 on provincial levels in 2018, and there has been also a report being prepared for 2019 implementation of GRB in Serbia. In Macedonia, the experience is somewhat different. So although we don't have the policy, the legal framework for gender responsive budgeting, we were the first and only country in the region to introduce GRB strategy, and it was introduced in 2012, and it was implemented until 2017. And in 2018, we were expected as a country to actually revise, to reform the public finance management system and the budget law. The budget law is in draft being prepared, as well as the reform of the public finance management system, but it hasn't been adopted yet. The reason is there is no political will for program budgeting to be introduced. This is the way how people can, actually governments can much easier use the money without being accountable to citizens. So although we haven't had a legal framework for gender responsive budgeting, and now with the expiration of the strategy, we don't have even a policy framework, still gender responsive budgeting practices exist. And why? Because the government has changed the budget circular for central budget users in 2013 and for the local budget users in 2018. So all budget users are required to do gender budget analysis of their budget measures and to include gender budget objectives. Even the local budget users are expected to present their gender budget interventions in a separate budget program, which is the budget program X, in the programmatic presentation of the budget. There are 14 central level institutions that are piloting the methodology for gender analysis of programs, and there are 20 local governments that are also doing so of their local programs. And for example, last year we have had 172 gendered measures on local level. All this has been supported by UN Women, as was the case in Serbia, as was the case in Albania. So I must say that while the political will is not maybe at the highest level, the pressure and the positive pressure from international organizations and the partnership approach helps this process happen in the 3 countries. The GRB experience in Kosovo is very similar to that of the countries of the region. The difference is that the other countries target the budget loss, and Kosovo has taken another turn, and that is to include gender responsive budgeting into the law on gender equality, which requires gender mainstreaming of all policies, documents and legislation, including the budget. And Article 5 in this law specifically defines inclusion of gender budgeting in all areas as a necessary tool to guarantee that the principle of gender equality is respected in collecting, distribution and allocation of the resources. The Ministry of Finance also has a role because it has, although it is not regulating GRP in the budget law, it has changed the budget circular to operationalize the requirement of inclusion of gender into the budgeting process in collecting, distribution and allocation of resources. There has been a concept document on GRB being adopted in Kosovo, and it is used this approach in 66% of the local government's budgets and 48% of the central government institutions. Our partner, the Kosovo Women's Network, has been involved in the capacity building of civil servants in this process, but also in gender analysis of the budget programs, and now will be very active into monitoring the commitments to GRB in the by central and local level government programs. So the 2 countries that we don't have here, 3 countries actually, maybe, no, sorry, the last country here that we have presented is Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina is has introduced program budgeting quite early in 2013 with the decision of the Ministry of Finance and the Treasury of Bosnia, where it was defined that gender responsive budgeting will be part of the public finance system, and it was included in the gender equality law. There has been action plan, a strategic plan for introduction of GRB in Bosnia that expired in 2015, and since then it hasn't been picked up. The implementation was by inclusion of gender into budget instruction and by including of performance indicators in the software which is managing the budget implementation, which is called Budget Management Information System. However, our monitoring showed that neither the budget instructions are followed, nor the formulation of the indicators have been happening in the last period. On the top, also the institutional stakeholders told us that the budget management information system needs to be upgraded, and this is the reason why they have not used its full features towards gender equality goals. The two countries that we don't have in the presentation are Montenegro and Moldova. The reason why is that there has been a very shy interest shown by the government of both countries in terms of introduction of GRB. In Moldova, somewhat more expressed than in Montenegro, although in Montenegro in the last year we have seen specific interest of introduction of GRB in agriculture, in the budget for the agriculture, the so-called agro budget. Which is still not case in Moldova. But I can welcome the representatives from these two countries to maybe tell us some more on this, if they have information, of course. You're welcome.
Thank you, Maria.
Yeah, Maria, I'm afraid I cannot add anything else, and I love how you said a shy interest in GRB. I think you were looking very much for a proper word to say that. As you said, the precondition is political will. Unfortunately, there is no political will yet in Moldova. However, our general hope is that if civil society organizations will join the efforts, we will probably promote this program budgeting and, of course, the GRB as a part of the program budgeting.
Thank you, Natalia. Anyone from Montenegro, maybe with the knowledge on GRB?
If I can?
Yes.
I'm not sure what is the situation in Montenegro, but as I said before, we don't have so much experience in that area. But I would really like to hear what is the situation from somebody who is more aware of it. Because as we know, there are no special measures on gender responsive budgeting, neither any of the plans on the national level, but maybe someone from the association who is partner on the project has more experience with it.
There has been some budget allocated for gender equality, but this is actually the budget that is being used by the Department for Gender Equality within the Ministry of Human Rights. There has been initiated reform of the budget process by introduction of program budgeting. I've met with the team last year, some Dutch companies supporting the overall integration of the program budget in the public finance system there. And there has been a clear will to integrate gender in at least 2 programs in the agro budget. So I know that this year they are going to work on the milking sector and on the fruits production sector. The gender perspective will be introduced in the strategy, the new agricultural strategy. But in all other sectors, I think the political establishment felt that there is gender equality in Montenegro and that there is no need for a specific gender approach into developing policies and budgets. So we need to, maybe through agriculture, persuade them that this is a useful tool And why they have chosen agriculture? Because they think that gender inequalities are spread only in rural areas, which is another stereotype. Okay, maybe Mirela was planning actually to facilitate the discussion.
We can do it together. It was by mistake in the agenda. It's not a problem for me, of course. Anybody that want to join for the both presentations that we have, again, to continue the discussion for the first session and second session is welcome.
Anyone?
No, please. You are not inspired. Okay, for some organizations, these are first knowledge on gender responsive budgeting, but are interesting, right?
It's actually what I've presented is the government perspective, the approach the governments are taking. So knowing that this is the situation and knowing that everything, how we live life, what we, how we communicate between each other, how we have different needs and interests, we can actually use that approach into assessing the policies and budgets, knowing that the countries have some commitment, whether this is coming out from the EU or the Council of Europe, or I forgot to mention the SDGs. The SDGs, as you know, have the Sustainable Development Goals, and one of them is related to gender equality, the number 5. And number 5 goal has also one sub-indicator, that is 5C1, which is measuring the progress of countries in terms of gender-responsive budgeting. And by assessing this progress, we as a network have identified that there are so many entry points for civil society in terms of advocating for more transparency, publication of the budget data, of gender statistics, of documents that are assessing the impact, to steering debates in the media, in the public, with citizens, with parliamentarians, to strengthen the role of the parliament in the process of using GRB as a tool for holding government accountable for the use of the public money. So there is quite a lot of role of civil society into using GRB as a tool in the different policy areas. And tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we will show you how to do it. I think it will be more practical. It will share tools and practical approaches that you can use into assessing policies and budgets from a gender perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Could you please open your videos? Because the photos that Arda did before, some of you has the video closed. According to the new, let's say, new suggestions from the experts, it is not suggested that the people do multitasking when they are doing Zoom call, for the reason, not for the reason that they have to listen to the speakers, but because there are many problems with headaches, with other things, and now is the beginning of this kind of things that we are doing. Being 3 days in a training session, according to the doctors, to the physicians, and doing other tasks in the computer will bring you later into a situation that make you feeling not good, I mean nervous, etc. So only for that reason, that's why we extended the training into 3 days with small slots, because it's not easy for people to listen online and to participate online. That's why. So this is so please open your camera again, and we at least do a photo, and if anybody else has to say something, is welcome.
Just bear with me 1 minute, please, because we have many participants and I need to switch the screen. So Ermira, Murieta, Kimet, Miroslava, if it's possible, you should open the camera, please.
Maybe they don't have camera.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll do like this. Okay, and the other screen. Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for them.
Do another one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you. Not everybody opened the camera, but anyhow, thank you.
Oh, not again, huh? Okay.
Yeah. No.
Well, thank you, Alda. Now, okay, I see. Natasha is saying again that it is a relatively new approach for me, but as an organization that works at the COR, I think that this approach can be used for all 17 purposes. I am interested in whether such activities have already started. Natasha, can you again explain better yourself, please, to the participants? Mention some purposes your organizations are working.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
As Maria previously said that the SDGs are also very important. My question was, did you use this approach for these 17 SDGs? Yeah, because this gender budgeting, from my perspective, I believe that can be used in all of them, and it's very important. I think that I believe that it's very important to work on this and to see how it's the advanced and how it's work and how the indicators are fulfilled. We as an organization, we work on the SDGs 6 and 4. And sorry, 11 too, but this approach will be really very important and will be very useful for us. Yeah. Then my question is that did you already start to work on the SDGs and gender budgeting?
Yes, so we have done an assessment using the methodological note on assessing the achievement of SDG 5C1, which is the gender responsive budgeting indicator. And we have produced as a network report that we will be issuing very soon. We are now internally finalizing document. It's ready. It will be published in early July. Once we do the technical preparation of the report. And you will see that a lot of countries in the region need to speed up the process of implementation. It's a good starting point for advocacy of all CSOs. We can have it as a joint advocacy agenda of all CSOs that are included in the network. If you would like, we would set up a separate meeting online to discuss the advocacy strategies that each of our organizations can have in spreading the report and creating a pressure on our governments to speed up the process of achievement of this SDG indicator. The assessment was done for the 2019 budget year, and it is done for all 7 countries in the region. So it's this Western Balkans plus Moldova. And I think it's a very important contribution because no one else has done such a shadow report on the achievement of the SDG indicators, and especially this one. And I think it's also important because civil society has not been very active into using these methodological notes that have been developed by the UN custodial or agencies. Probably this will be the first that I know that is produced by civil society. So if you are interested, maybe next week we can set up a meeting related to the advocacy of this SDG report. Is anyone else working on SDGs?
Yes, we work as journalists for human rights. We work on SDGs. That would be very interesting to have this meeting.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. Thank you all. Makedonka and all. Yes, we will provide you with assignment. I will immediately now. I will send you an email with the assignment from my side and 2 handouts. Also, my presentation. And Maria, when she will be ready, she will send it to you also, or tomorrow after.
For today, I have no assignments because I just wanted to introduce the concept, and I took this approach of presenting definitions, benefits to it, and the experiences. Otherwise, we would actually use the homework for you to research the stage of development in the region. But because Miriel asked me to present the different regional experiences, I have taken this approach. But for tomorrow, I will divide you into groups, and I will have a lot of data for you to analyze.
Okay. Well, if nobody
Irina has a question, Mirella, on the chat.
Andat, lutam se pojle zor. If you...
I'm sorry,
you have a question, Alda?
No, Irina wrote something on the chat.
Alda, I saw.
Sorry, because I'm not listening, sorry.
Yeah. I was telling you, thank you very much for listening to us during all this time for today, and I hope that you will be all tomorrow. As I mentioned to you, please don't take any other task with you. It is not good for you, I mean, and the materials that we are sharing are important for the future steps of your organization, and probably for you to make a winner of the call that Maria mentioned that we will open. So please, let's see each other during the presentations tomorrow and on Friday. and discuss regarding the topics that we have presented today and the ones that we will present during the next 2 days. So thank you so much, and have a very nice day ahead. See you all tomorrow. The training tomorrow will start at 9:30 for Albania, Serbia, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kosovo, and will start on 10:30 for the participants from Moldova.